highest rate of is 35 to 50-year-old men with a beautiful wife in the suburban house with the best school district, with the 2 kids, eventually 3 kids, right? Like, I had that life, the nice car, everything else. I was that guy, but I was bankrupt inside. It's because we've silently been dying for years, and we don't even realize that we have until one day we wake up and it either goes well or it doesn't.
What do most men miss when it comes to seeing that they're in a toxic relationship? Well, to answer that question, Josh Tomioni of the Derelict podcast joins me to talk about the male perspective of an abusive relationship. I'm excited to have Josh Tomioni join me today, and thank you so much for reaching out. I love the fact that you're in this space because there's not enough men describing their experiences of destructive pathological relationships. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of tell me how you got where you are and what we really don't understand about the male experience of pathological love relationships.
It's a loaded question. I love it. It's a good way to start the podcast. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll try to answer this in two stages. So first, I'll be brief about who I am. So I'm a middle-aged divorced dad of 3 kids. And I got divorced in my mid-30s. I'm now in my low 40s. And I was married for a very long time to a woman that I met. I met her when I was 18. We started dating when I was 19. We got married when I was 22, 2 months after I graduated college. She was a couple years older. So I didn't really have a whole lot of experience, honestly, of dating or knowing women before that. I mean, I did a little bit in high school and at the very beginning of college, but it was pretty new. I was pretty naive in a lot of ways. So as is true with maybe everybody else that gets married at 22, of course I knew everything about getting married and how to keep a great relationship. Clearly it worked out for me. So all that being said, why do I bring that up? Well, the reason I bring that up is because I was in what I would say was actually a very toxic marriage for a very long time, and I had no clue. It was actually the exact opposite. I thought that our marriage was the marriage that other couples looked at and said, wow, look at them. The ego with that, right? Wow, look at them. They really have it figured out. They can communicate well. I was a communication major in college, so of course I can communicate well, right? They could communicate well. You know, like the sexual relationship was decent. The financial, the physical, like all of it seemed pretty decent. And then it came out that it wasn't decent. It was toxic. We end up getting divorced. And full circle, now I actually work with men that are going through divorce, that are dealing with difficult relationships and transitioning through them. Because what I realized is I looked out over the last couple of years and said, where's all the guys helping guys get through divorce? And then I realized there isn't a market for that. There is no one. There aren't any divorce coaches. I just don't ever see them. There are life coaches, and maybe they help people with divorce. There are attorneys, there are therapists, but there aren't any divorce coaches. So what's the difference? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But let me answer your other question first, because I don't want to just keep babbling on about the first thing. Your other question was something to the effect of the, let's say, supposed abuse or the male experience in either a narcissistic relationship or, you know, we were briefly talking about this before the call. I don't love throwing around the word narcissist just because I feel like our society throws around all the time.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll start with my opinion in that we all have narcissistic tendencies. So what is a narcissistic tendency? It's a tendency for me to care primarily about myself, irregardless of what happens to you, irregardless of what happens to somebody else, or to actually manipulate you to get you to do what I want you to do. So I don't know about you, but I've done that before.
Yeah.
I think we all have, right?
You're right, exactly.
But I think some people have more narcissistic tendencies than others. So in other words, they do that far more often than other people do that. I would say the majority of the population, we might do it a few times and realize we made a mistake, go apologize, make an amends, move on with our life. That would be me. That's probably you. That's probably most people, right? And then there's a few people that just are blind to it and they just keep doing it. So I would say that I've been in a few relationships now with women like that. So the first thing that I would say is, before I throw anyone under the bus, I also attracted that energy to myself. So I take full responsibility for being in that relationship in the first place, because if I didn't attract that energy, I wouldn't have attracted that woman, and I wouldn't have been in a relationship with that woman.
That's very hard for people to hear that. I know that those listening would probably say, yeah, but I didn't know that I was, or I wasn't trying to, or if we lived in a more humane world, then this wouldn't even be an issue in it, which I think all of those things are very true.
I agree. I agree with all of those things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it had to be intentional. It doesn't have to mean that you like went out hunting for narcissists. Like that's,
yeah, exactly. Please partner up with me. I want to take it. Yeah,
it's the same. Like, I have a friend that I was just talking to the other day, and she's one of those people that's like, well, all guys are like this, and why are all guys like this, and all guys are like this, and all guys are like this, but I'm looking for this. I'm like, well, but if you keep saying all guys are X, fill in the blank, you're going to keep attracting those guys.
Yeah.
Or you're only going to see those attributes in the guys that you're talking to.
Yeah, it's like, I've ever noticed that when you go to buy a car and you looking at a new type, maybe a new model that you've never had, or a new, like a make and model, and suddenly you see them everywhere because you're looking for them, then you suddenly see them. It's the confirmation bias is what we're experiencing.
100%. So I have a 2020 navy green Toyota 4Runner SRD Pro, which is one of the, if not the most rare Toyota 4Runners. Now, that's not saying a whole lot because 4Runners are very popular, but this specific model with this specific color is the most rare 4Runner that they make. Yet I see them all the time because I have one.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm on the lookout for it. And frankly, when I bought it, there were 2 in the entire country that were for sale. So there's not a lot out there, but for some reason I keep seeing them. Well, I'm seeing them because I've trained my brain to see them. Exactly. There's a lot more white 4Runners, black 4Runners, gray 4Runners. I don't even notice them. I only notice the green ones.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
Because where your focus goes, your energy flows. That's it.
Yeah. So here you have this incredible relationship that you think that other people look at you and say, how lucky you are. What started to make you wake up and realize that there was something inherently deeply wrong?
You know, I wish that I could tell you that I did wake up. I didn't. So my story is, and this kind of goes to the question of men specifically, because I feel like we hear a lot more about women leaving toxic relationships. We don't hear a whole lot about men leaving toxic relationships. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. Number one is I think that the term abuse gets used a lot as well, just like the term narcissist gets used a lot. And the term abuse is kind of hard to define. It's kind of like in the eye of the beholder, right? Like, I don't know, was that abuse? Like you hear people walking around saying, well, I was abused. Well, how so? Like, obviously somebody punches you in the face. Yeah, clearly that's abuse.
That's fascinating.
But people use abuse all the time.
Yeah, do you mind if I stop on that? Because
sure.
I think that's a really important point that you're making. Yeah. Because to me, it's not a squishy term. I mean, that's what I'm hearing you kind of say. This is a squishy term. It's not a squishy term, in my opinion. This is how I see it, and obviously I see it through the eyes of a clinical psychologist. And that is whenever we diminish the value of another individual in service of ourselves. Now, sometimes that happens for things that are outside our control. Like if I'm sick, I'm going to expect you to sort of step up and help, hopefully if you care. And at that point, I can't really appreciate how that costs you. And is that abuse? No, because it's outside my control. I'm not intentionally trying to exploit you, but I am going to lean into you for your emotional labor. But I think it's when we fail to really appreciate and respect and hold space for another person's dreams, sense of being, their needs, their wishes. It's when all that happens is our preoccupation and our excessive focus on ourselves, and we see them as a means to serve ourselves exclusively.
Now,
I think that's how I kind of view it.
Yeah, even the way you describe it, and I don't disagree with the way you describe it, but the way you described it would mean if I were just looking at myself, I abuse people then every day. Because I have moments of what you just said every day where I get selfish and I'm only focused on myself, and we're like, well, forget you. I need to focus on myself right now. I mean, even the idea of I need to go do something for myself, and I'm like, you're not worth it right now because I'm worth more, it seems like would fall in that definition. That's why I feel like it's squishy.
That's interesting. But are you exploiting that individual in the sense that you're diminishing them or taking something away from them? Yes, you're saying, did they have a right to my time and attention? That's what I hear you saying. That I'm shifting my focus from a us focus to a me focus, I don't see that as abusive. But what I do see is, say that this individual came to you and said, I'm having a really rough day. Well, say that you have kids at home that are 5 and 6. There's nobody home. And you're like, yeah, Dad needs some time to myself. I'm going to go fish. Good luck, kids. I hope that goes well tonight. You feeding yourselves. I mean, to me, that would be, that shift of focus is hurtful because now you've impacted their well-being.
Yeah, I just think it's still, like, when you say diminish, like, who defines that? I mean, that's still an opinion, whether I've diminished somebody or not. So that still feels squishy to me. It still feels...
I can see how
it's objective. Correct.
Subjective. You could actually, there's times where somebody would say something that comes across as is a jab, and was it a jab? Did they mean it as a jab? It could be by the one that hears it says, yes, it was, and the one that said that, yeah, but that wasn't my heart. I hear your point.
Here's a good example. It would be like somebody with preferred pronouns, I think, is a good example. And here's the reason I mean that. If I come to you and I just call you a her, let's say before I even know what your preferred pronouns are or whatever, and they're not her, right? You could feel diminished by that if your preferred pronoun is they, as an example.
Yeah. But if I've said that 10 times to you and you outright refuse,
then I would say that there's some people that would say that's not me diminishing you, and there are other people that would say that is me diminishing you. I still think it's subjective.
Okay, so where is the line
then? Just because
then?
you're telling me to tell you something or to call you something doesn't mean I have to do it. Pronouns is a tricky one because there's a lot of energy around it right now.
There is a lot of energy.
But if we use something else, right, if you came to me and you say, well, you have to call me a psychologist, but you're a psychiatrist. Well, no, I don't. But is that diminishing you? Even though I'm saying something that's not actually accurate?
No, that I would see that is my exploitation of you.
Fair enough. But that's why I see it just feels elusive. I guess here's maybe one other way that I'll say it, is that abuse and trauma are two words that are used a lot. And I think what's maybe more important than defining the terms is talking about people's experience with the terms, because that's more where we're going with this. Because we could kind of figure this out all day long, but we don't have the time for it.
Right.
But I think if we were to just say, okay, let's just assume for a moment that they're subjective, abuse and trauma, because some people will see something as abuse and trauma and some others won't, right? I mean, again, somebody could see them being called the wrong pronoun a trauma versus somebody else who only sees it a trauma if they're drowning and can't, like, get out of the water. Like, those are two very different traumas, but everybody is subjective on what they think trauma is or how it affects them. You see this when people deal with their trauma versus not deal with their trauma. You see this all the time in practice, right? Somebody who deals with their, quote, trauma, again, let's just say it is a trauma because they're calling it that, but then they deal with it and they move forward, it's not affecting them anymore. Whereas other people are still living in a trauma that affected them 30 years ago and they're not able to move forward with it. So why do I mention all this? Well, it's to get back to your original question. Why I think a lot of men stay in toxic relationships, especially men, is that most men are not educated. They don't have the planning. They don't have the support. They don't have the knowledge to be able to realize when things are emotionally unstable or mentally unstable or spiritually unstable for them. Because we are told as men, ever since we're little boys, for the most part, we're told, look, you have to pick yourself up by your bootstraps, get up and try again, work harder, push harder, go on social media and see what guys are told. They say, do this to grow your business, do this to get six-pack abs. Is there any other advice for men? Pretty much not.
Not really, no.
That's pretty much it. It's like, well, as long as you have a fit body and a good bank account, you're good to go. Really? Is that the entire human experience as a man?
No. In fact, I get worried because to me, that is a very empty, meaningless life. There's not real connection there. And there's a great vulnerability there because that then means you're not tuned into the rest of the way things are happening. And there's so much else going on around you than that.
So let's take this man then. Let's just assume that they're the peak of man can be on social media. So they have a great body and they have a great business and they're making good money. Well, is there any way that person could be in a toxic, abusive relationship? 100% yes.
Yeah.
Because if that's their entire focus let's say it's not even their entire focus. Excuse me. Let me give them more benefit. Let's say that they really do want to do what's best for their wife. Let's say that they really do want to be a good dad. They really want to be a good spouse. Okay. So they are a good person. I'm not saying this is a bad person. They're a good person. They want to do what's best. They're trying to make money. They're trying to provide for their family. They're trying to stay in shape so that they're healthy, so that they stay active and do all these things. That from the outside, that looks fantastic. And that's basically where I was. I wasn't like this completely obese loser who was, getting support from everybody else, but not making my own way doing anything. Right. Like I wasn't that guy. I was a financial planner that wore a 3-piece suit, that made good money, that was respected in the community, that was part of Rotary, that was the youngest president of the Insurance and Financial Association. Like I was the guy that everybody looked at. They're like, well, yeah, you'll be mayor one day. Like that's who I was, right? Mm-hmm. With the beautiful wife in the suburban house with the best school district, with the 2 kids, eventually 3 kids, right? Like I had that life, the nice car, everything else. I was that guy. But I was bankrupt inside. So going back to why do men stay in these relationships is because they don't even realize it a lot of the time. So I'm going to use a word that you don't like, and that's codependent. And here's how I define codependent. There's different definitions based on what you look at.
Which is why I don't like it.
Melody Betty's book, Codependent No More, is a fantastic one if you are interested in exploring codependency anymore. I think her work on the subject is the best that I've read, at least. But the way that I describe codependency is that I want you to act and feel a certain way so that I feel a certain way. In other words, I want you to do something to validate me so I feel good inside. So I will manipulate a situation even though I wouldn't ever use the word manipulate. Like I don't think that I'm doing this. I just want you to be happy. So if you're my spouse and you're upset about something, my number one job is to make sure that you're not upset, to calm you down, to make sure that you're joyful, to make sure that you're happy, to make sure that you're okay with your life, because then happy wife, happy life, right? So as long as I make you happy, then I'm good. But it requires you to be good for me to be good. That's a very unhealthy combination in a relationship.
Yes, exactly.
Because that means I'm not bringing my true self. I'm not bringing my true, authentic, loving, whatever self. I'm also not bringing any of my emotions to the table because they're invalid.
Right.
Because the only emotion that's valid is yours. So what I think happens with a lot of men is that they aren't getting validated from their spouse. They don't know how to do it themselves. So they haven't learned how to do that yet. And by the way, there's no judgment here whatsoever when I'm having this conversation. I didn't start learning how to do this till my mid-30s. So if you're watching this and you're like, oh yeah, that guy knows how to, no, I don't. I'm still learning in my low 40s how to do this.
Well, I didn't start learning this until my late 50s. So there you go.
Yeah,
I'm
perfect.
A psychologist. Yeah,
So we all, here's the thing with timelines. It's like, watch any super successful entrepreneur, actor, etc. Everyone has a different timeline. Like some people started when they're 6, some people started when they're 60. And it's okay. Whatever your timeline is your timeline. If you're listening or watching this right now and you're 75 years old and you're like, I haven't figured this out yet, good news. You still have time. So start today.
Exactly.
So here's the deal. Guys are in these relationships and they're not confident enough in and of themselves just being themselves. They want to make sure that their wife is pleased, that she's okay, that she's taken care of. Part of our job, I believe, as men is to protect and to help and to, lead in that way, not in a, chauvinistic, lording sort of way, but just like that is part of our gifting as men. And when we don't feel like we can do that because we're stuck in this relationship where it's like, man, I feel like I'm always doing something wrong, or I'm always just like trying to keep the peace, etc. But as long as I keep the peace, everything's okay. And as long as everything's okay, then I'm doing my job. Because my wife's okay, my kids are okay. That guy would never say he was in an abusive relationship.
No, they would say they actually had probably everything that anybody would ever want, which is what you said at the start.
Which is what I said.
Right.
But they don't realize what's actually happening behind the scenes. The emotional abuse, the spiritual abuse, the stuff when the spouse is manipulating them in a certain way for them to do certain things because they've figured out that that's how their spouse works. And I'm not saying every spouse is like this. I'm just saying the ones that are in toxic relationships. So this often happens, and the man automatically invalidates himself. And then he gets that same invalidation from everywhere he looks Because if he goes on social media, you don't see men validating that experience in men. You see men saying, stand the F up, get better, get back on the horse, become a better, be stronger, get better abs, get stronger muscles, whatever. Like, you don't see them validating the fact of like, this is emotional abuse. This is spiritual abuse. You need to figure this out.
So go back to the moment of you invalidating yourself. So can you give an example of how that would show up, how that showed up for you?
Sure. I would. Worst case scenario, you shame yourself. Best case scenario, you're feeling guilty for something you shouldn't feel guilty over. So I get in an argument with my wife and then I'm feeling guilty and like it's all my fault, that argument. Well, guess what? Every argument involves two people, at least. So it's not all my fault. It's never all my fault. No argument's ever 100% one person's fault. Because otherwise it wouldn't be an argument. Otherwise it would just be one person yapping at somebody else and the other person literally not doing anything. That's not an argument. So there's always at least 1% the other person's deal. But I would internalize all of that because I'm like, well, I'm responsible for this. I need to lead the household. I need to, a lot of that was like some of my conservative religious baggage that came up as well. It was like, I need to lead the household. I need to be the man. I need to make sure, instead of just realizing like, no, you're wrong right now. I don't agree with you. Here's the reasons why. Here's what I think is happening. I would never say that back then. I was too scared. I was too scared that was going to upset the apple cart. And God forbid something like a divorce happened. That was 100% against my family of origin story of every marriage that anyone ever got into. You weren't allowed to divorce. That wasn't a thing. Which goes back to your question. When did you finally realize that? I didn't. I let it go too far until the toxicity rose above the surface and she started doing crazy things and I started doing crazy things. And we both started acting out in different ways, which aren't important to the podcast. If somebody wants to reach out to me directly, I'm an open book, but I don't want to throw anyone under the bus here. But we both started reaching out in very, very toxic ways until one day, even though I would say I had plenty of reasons to like call it off, she was the one that actually served papers because we were both at that point where the toxicity was just, you couldn't ignore it anymore.
What struck me by your story is that there was a lot of assumption of role expectations as if it was an evaluation, which then led to you feeling like you were failing constantly in the role that you thought you were doing so well at. Here you are trying, and you're getting feedback of it's not good enough.
Which is very common, by the way, in the male experience, from my experience, from the men that I coach, is there's a lot of men that just feel like they're doing the work with no appreciation. I mean, part of, not everyone's going to agree with this next statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. Part of the male experience is doing things that people are not going to appreciate. That's part of being a strong man. It just is. And we live in a society right now where everybody's told that everybody should be validating everybody for everything. And frankly, it's just not part of the male experience. Like, men are just called to do things that are not going to be validated. That if you want to have any sort of success in your life, in your body, in your career, in your spiritual life, etc., you're going to have to do things that you are going to have to validate yourself. No one else is going to validate.
Right.
My firm belief, whether you're religious or not, is that there's only two ways to validate yourself. And that is for me to have the most authentic, loving relationship with myself, and for me to have the most loving, authentic relationship with my higher power, whatever I call that higher power. Whether it's higher power, God, universe, whatever. If you are of the belief that you are the highest power in the universe, then you are a narcissist. For the rest of us that aren't, we believe in some sort of higher power. Higher power, universe, God, whatever. We can leave religion out of it. It doesn't matter. The point is, there's something bigger than ourselves, and then there's ourselves. That's where 100% of my validation comes from. The moment it's less than 100%, I'm on the wrong track. And that happens to me every single day of my life. Trust me, I wish I was at 100%. I'm not.
It's wild. I don't know all the ins and outs of what happened in your relationship, but it's wild is listening to you because my first marriage that ended in death, he passed away from cancer, looked a lot. I mean, we looked really good, and we were in a lot of ways functioning pretty well. Now, did I feel seen? Yeah, he loved me, deeply loved me, but he was selfish, and he leaned heavily into my labor and he wanted the traditional life. He felt that he deserved that without realizing that it was at the cost of me. so that I was carrying enormous amount of the load and it was burning me out. And I was also tremendously lonely because this person really wasn't authentically showing up as himself. He was showing up as an incredible provider and a very stable, loyal partner, but he wasn't a confidant, and I was deeply looking for that. So I was dying of loneliness in that relationship. Would I have ever left him? No, probably not. Did I had a fulfilling experience as a partner to him? No, I didn't. It would have always left me feeling, I was sad. I cried a lot privately when he wasn't around about what was. So I listened to you, and I'm not saying there wasn't abuse in there, but what hurt me, and I know we're kind of moving off of the original topic here, but what hurt me deeply was I kept wishing he could just show up vulnerable and just share who he was with me, but he would say it was too painful. He didn't like to do that. He felt too exposed and uncomfortable. And to me, it was like, but you don't know that that's where the greatest strength is. Maybe not all women. I'm not saying all women are equally as available. I mean, goodness, my job is listening to people's problems. I have the capacity not to judge somebody for having problems, but he really felt fear about risking that side of himself with me. And that's why
I have an insight as to why.
What? Okay, so what do you think to that?
Men do not like to feel vulnerable. They do not want to be vulnerable. The subject of vulnerability to a man is, get that out of my face.
Which I find sad.
I don't. Here's the reason why. I think it's a reframing. I think for women, they can see vulnerability as a superpower. Men see it as a disservice to them. And here's the reason why I believe. Vulnerability for a man assumes I have no power. If I have no power as a man, I'm not a man. Therefore, what are you actually seeking with vulnerability? Aren't you seeking authenticity? Aren't you seeking somebody to be real with you about their struggles and their emotions and what they're going through and be authentic with you about that experience? That's what you're looking for, right?
Exactly.
So as long as it's reframed to a man as being your authentic self, I think it lands a lot better.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because that doesn't remove any of my power, but it still accomplishes the same purpose.
Okay, so define power for me for a second, because you said if your masculinity is rooted in power, that would have never crossed my mind ever as a woman. I don't see my sense of self as defined in my power at all.
Right, because you're not a man.
Right, but I don't even know what that means.
So what it means is it's not necessarily physical strength, even though physical strength is a part of it. And part of the reason, even though I just, ragged on the gym bros so much, I work out every day of my life as well, but it's not because you can see me like I'm in shape, but I'm not like a gym bro, right?
Right.
But the reason I do it is because it's difficult. It's something that it takes effort. It's something that makes me feel powerful and makes me be able to be like this instead of like this all the time. And this will crush a man. This will not. So power is confidence. It's calmness. It's courage. It's being centered in oneself. It's being authentically who you are. I don't care if it's a gym bro or if it's a nerd or if it's a lawyer or if it's an actor. It doesn't matter. Whoever it is you are. If you're goofy, if you're serious, doesn't matter. Power comes when we live authentically ourselves. Now, women wouldn't call it power, to your point. I've never heard a woman call it power. For a man, it is, though. So when you say something like vulnerability, that just removes all my power, which removes my manhood. So I'm not interested. But if you tell me to be authentic, I'm like, hell yeah. I want to be authentic. I want to be more myself. That's powerful. That to me is engaging. It's encouraging. It's like, yes, I can do that.
I'm surprised you didn't use the word control in there. I expected power to also include control.
That's because we live in a society where power is equated with toxic behaviors, controlling, chauvinistic, all this BS we hear about toxic masculinity. That's where power, most people relate power to. That's not power. That's actually weakness. That's the opposite. That's somebody who's insecure.
Yes.
And they're bringing their insecurity out in very evil ways. That whether it's man or woman doesn't matter.
Okay, so now we're honing in better on the word abuse. Okay? To me, it's the diminishing of another person by exerting control without their permission.
Yes, I get that.
That, to me, is abuse.
Yeah, that's less squishy to me.
Okay. Because, thank you for that clarification, because that really helped me a lot. That's fascinating. And I agree. I think that for me, the healing came when I began to realize that I was the answer to my own problems.
100%. 100%. And you might not call that power. I do. And I think most men would as well.
Interesting.
Because that's a healthy power. Again, it's not this abusive power. There's different types of power, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm not doing that in order to control and manipulate you who can't take care of yourself. That would be abuse to your definition.
Right.
I'm doing it to become the best, most authentic, loving, amazing, courageous version of myself possible.
Right, right. What I figured out when I got out of the second relationship, which was sort of the epitome of the worst, very dangerous predator, is who I married the second time. And when I got out of that, I realized what I'd done was I prioritized the we of the us, as a way to care for me.
Right.
And that was completely wrong. That I didn't know that if I was well and brought my best self in a healthy, stable, regulated way, that we were going to be good too.
100%.
And that's the big shift that I'm making now.
For sure. And going back to the word control,
yeah,
we have very little control of anything in life.
Yes, exactly.
Because any of us could die at any moment.
Right.
However, we do have control over a couple things. And I would say the most important thing that we have control over is our thoughts. We can control those. We can shut off bad ones. We can replace them with new ones. There's programming we can do. It's all scientifically studied. It's proof, right? We can control that, which then can allow us to control our actions. That's it. We can't control anybody else. And again, in essence, codependency and narcissism are the same thing because they're both trying to control the other person. They're just doing it in different ways.
Yeah.
I'm trying to control you as a codependent so that you feel good so I feel good. I'm trying to control you as a narcissist so that I get what I want and I don't really care what happens to you. It's the same thing. It's still for me.
Except I would add the caveat. And by the way, you might want to also really look into this new word that's popping up a lot more, egoism, which is the opposite of narcissism, which is a person who lives through the identity of another individual for safety, also for the expression of self, which is very, it's another way to think of codependency.
Aquaism?
Echoism, from echo and narcissist.
Echoism. Interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard that.
Yeah. You become an echo of the narcissist. You're a reflection of them. But yeah, that what you're saying there, when I know that people listening will struggle with that because they're like, but I wasn't doing those behaviors to serve me. I was doing those behaviors to survive.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
I agree. I was as well.
Yeah.
Again, we're talking to, recovering codependent over here. So yes, I agree. And I was doing those to survive as well because I felt like if I didn't do those, I was toast. But was I really? No, because I could have left the relationship at any time. I had the power to do that. I wasn't locked in a basement.
Well, there's kind of where I maybe I'm making a generalization that's unfair, but that's, I think, to me, a very different mindset of a woman versus a man, in the sense that men insist they always have all options at all times. I actually think that you just said a second ago that we don't have control. I don't think we always have all our options at all times. I do. Well, literally, maybe we do, but that other person can certainly make it extremely scary or dangerous
100%.
for us.
Of course. And it was the same way for me. And it's the same way for men. And it gets looked at differently because in general, men are stronger, have more muscles, etc., so they can force a woman to stay somewhere, right? So that's
right, because leaving for a woman is the most dangerous time, and that's when most of the extremely terrible things start to happen, including possibly losing her own life.
So I would agree, but I don't disagree that doesn't happen to men either.
No, I know. Yeah, please hear me. I'm not saying that men aren't physically at jeopardy. Absolutely.
So I agree. So we got to be really careful here because I want to make sure that we don't overgeneralize this to the entire population for the very select, very small few women that are actually like chained to a basement or going to get if they leave a relationship. That does exist 100%.
It happens more than you think. You're talking to somebody who is
it
most
happens
likely
in your experience more than you think because of the fact that you deal with these people.
Well, maybe. I'm shocked at more frequently. I know you're back to thinking it's confirmation bias.
It's what we focus on, right? So I've been a financial planner for almost 2 decades, And I could tell you plenty of things about finances because I've been focusing on them for 2 decades that would be blown away from you, just like you're trying to do with me right now with who you're working with.
Yeah, I have a feeling the comment section on this part of this is going to be very wild.
It will be.
I wish I had all the stats at my fingertips. I don't, but I know the stats are pretty horrific. And I do have this statistic, which is shocking, about the impact of narcissistic abuse. The outcome of PTSD symptoms for narcissistic abuse is extraordinarily, nearly double what happens if you are a World War II vet or, seen live action.
It's higher?
Yeah, almost double.
Wow, that's crazy.
Because of the erosion of sense of self. That's why I'm saying it's not, there is a lack of freedom, because the erosion of self causes you to no longer see those options. You actually become blind to your strength because you've so submitted to the dynamics of the abuse.
Yes, I agree with you. So here, I want to make sure something is really, really clear. I'm not invalidating anyone's experience that is like their life is being threatened or they're worried about being hurt or harmed or anything else. This is not an invalidation of anything. All of my heart and sympathy and empathy goes towards those people. I've known plenty of those people in my life. And for my entire life, I've been a guy that like wants to protect women that can't protect themselves. So trust me, I get that. And I'm not trying to invalidate that experience at all. And I think there's a couple really important keys here. When someone is a victim, there's 2 aspects of victimhood. There is, am I a victim because I'm an actual victim? In other words, are the facts actually making me a victim, right? Like, am I getting abused, whether it's emotional, spiritual, physical, whatever, right? So that's being a victim. The second aspect of being a victim is, are you a victim in your head? Because there's a lot of people that have been through a lot of really bad stuff that have come out the other side and use that to actually improve the lives of others. And there's a lot of people that have been through a lot of bad stuff that stay in victimhood the rest of their life and don't help anybody, including themselves.
Yeah.
So my encouragement to somebody who's gone through that is do the hard work to become the person that lives that life where you can help yourself and others on the other side. And that's what I'm trying to do with my life. I know that's what you're trying to do with your life as well.
Absolutely.
Just from our brief conversation. But then the second thing I would say, which is something that you just referenced, is that it's much easier. I think the reason abuse usually is physical or sexual in nature is it's much more dramatic and it's much easier to be seen. So if there's a news story about this guy punched this woman in the face or this guy raped this woman, that is much more newsworthy, which is just entertainment. That's all news is. That's much more entertaining, more entertainment newsworthy than, hey, this woman was silently manipulating this man for the last 3 years. Like, that's not a story.
Sure.
It's
I
boring.
get you.
So I think that's one of the reasons why. However, here's one way that I see it happening, and I'm not blaming women for this, so don't hear this the wrong way. But men are more silent most of the time about the abuse that they're suffering as well. First, they don't even necessarily realize it's happening because they don't call it abuse. Like, she didn't hit me. She didn't rape me. Therefore, I didn't get abused. Even if I was abused for years and years and years and years through manipulative, emotional, spiritual abuse. So first of all, I don't even realize it. Second of all, if I do realize it, I don't know what to do with it. As a guy, we're not really good about getting a tribe and a community and a bunch of people that we talk to about it. Like, you women talk to each other about everything, like all the time. And I love that. I wish guys were more like that. We aren't.
I do too.
Like, literally, case in point, buddy just texted me the other day, I have a podcast as well. And he texted, hey, how's the podcast going? My response, good. Women would never do that. Never. First of all, the text probably wouldn't even exist because you want more details. Second, the good would never suffice, right? Like,
no.
Jeff
exactly.
Foxworthy has a whole stand-up about this from like 20 years ago. You should go watch it. It's hilarious. But that being said, where does it show up for men? Well, what I would say is that a lot of this abuse is the silent killer. Mm-hmm. It's not the obvious killer. But I'll just point out one statistic that I think is one of the saddest statistics that I know of. And that is that the highest rate of is 35 to 50-year-old men. Why is that? I'm in that era of my life right now. It's the peak of our life. We usually have our families by now. We have kind of a little bit of our career figured out. We're making better money. We're more successful. And it's the time that either people go buy Miatas or Porsches or younger wives or kill themselves. Why is that? It's because we've silently been dying for years. And we don't even realize that we have until one day we wake up and it either goes well or it doesn't.
Here's another interesting thing, the connection between heart disease and anger, that there's a direct connection between the two, and yet what kills men the most? Well, heart disease does. So what anger are they sitting on for all those years that have been silenced, that there's no place to go, nothing to do with it, and they are quietly feeling like they are being ground into the ground, literally. They're to be annihilated because they're not being seen or validated for all the hard stuff that they do. I agree. We talk a lot about the epidemic of loneliness in men. I think there's an epidemic of men's failing to know how to really be emotionally seen and loved and valued. And I love to see that change. So I'm just so thankful that you're here today and we're talking about this. Let's jump over to the podcast extra and talk about what are the signs that men should be looking for that indicate that there is something maybe inherently really going wrong in this relationship, some practical things that they could be looking for to spot that. But how can people find you, Josh? Where should they look for you?
Sure. One of the best ways to contact me is through Instagram, because I still message every single person through Instagram. It's not an EA, it's not a VA, it's not my team members, it's me. So go to Instagram. I'm Josh the Derelict. Derelict is spelled Derelict. So just go to Instagram, Josh the Derelict. Do me a favor, follow me, and then send me a message. If you send me the message, coach, I'm happy to have a free quick coaching call with you. If you message me the word ebook, I'm happy to send you my book for free, which is about people going through divorce. So if you're going through a divorce, you've recently gone through a divorce, send me ebook. I'm happy to send you that book as well.
That's great. Thank you very, very much for bringing this to light. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Agreed. Thanks for having me on.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Are you following me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube? You can find me at Kerry McAvoy, PhD. Or you can learn more about me and my resources, such as the Toxic Free Relationship Club, at kerrymcavoyphd.com. And I'll see you back here next week.